What are you 100% sure is true, even though you can't prove it? Growing up, we had a family of friends that did everything with our family. Camping, holidays, random get-togethers, everything. I am dead certain that my father was having an affair with the wife, and my mother was having an affair with the husband, and neither of them knew of the other's affair. For the longest time, I knew there was affairs going on, but thought it was more of a swinger or poly relationship kind of thing until I was an adult, and my mother started talking about visiting the husband without his wife or my father knowing, and the more I probed, the more certain I became that neither of them knew the other was doing it. I have kept this to myself because they're all in their mid-60s or dead with 35 plus years of marriage, and it just seems pointless to rock the boat, but I find it extremely amusing. I had a friend growing up whose parents split up and both remarried another split couple. It was weird when the step-siblings changed houses. They both went to the other house. Wait, I'm not the only one with a sitcom setup for a family? My parents divorced when I was in high school, and each independently met and remarried the members of a separate divorced couple. It's always fun to watch people try to connect the dots when I tell them that my stepmom and stepdad are exes.
When I was a kid, there was a couple houses down the street that one day had a bunch of activity going on. Furniture, household items, boxes, clothes, etc. could be seen coming out of one house and into the other house and vice versa. Turns out the wives swapped houses and life carried on.
When my mom died, my dad almost immediately shacked up with my godmother. I strongly suspect it was preordained by my mom before she passed. One time, my cat used her paw to gag herself and puke on the floor because I wasn't paying enough attention to her. My disabled dachshund will bite his lame foot and make it bleed if he thinks that it will make us pay more attention to him than our other dogs.
I had a dog who sprained her leg and had a limp for several months. Then one day I caught her walking normally, and as soon as she saw I was looking, she started limping.
Had a Shetland sheepdog that when we were away, we used to board back with her breeder, so she would be staying with her sisters and mother. She used to have a grand time playing with them, sometimes in the fields, and sometimes in the concrete around the kennels. With all that playing, she wore her foot pads down so they were a bit sore, and when we arrived, she was limping heavily, the breeder explained, and we sat with them for a while having afternoon tea on their veranda. Meanwhile, I could my Sheltie out of the corner of my eye happily running around in the field with her relatives, but as soon as I turned to look at her, she would start dramatically limping again.
Nothing is on sale anymore. The sale price you see is what the actual price is that has already been marked up.
The only sales I trust are Steam sales.
TV in the spring and summer, $499. The same TV late in the summer, $699. Black Friday deal, $599.
Saying it's quiet in any job dealing with the public, you have just fucked up your day.
Every time I would get bored at my previous job, I would say, "It sure is quiet today." Worked every time. Added a word, corrected a spelling error.
After hours of nobody coming in, I'd go pee. The second I'm gone, a customer will walk in, and I'll find them standing there impatiently when I get back 2 minutes later, 60% of the time. It works every time.
At my work, we call it summoning a customer because the place will be dead until the second an associate dips into the bathroom. Then someone walks in, and the phone rings at the same time, and the one associate left has to decide who to ignore.
When I first started my job a decade ago, the union and company were in the middle of contract negotiations. The company was bringing in a batch of new hires every month, like nearly a dozen people each batch, with 3 to 4 of them coming to my specific department. They did this for nearly 6 months, as negotiations kept stalling. Then, the company announced that they were struggling and had to lay people off in order to make it. They laid off half the people they had hired since I had been hired on, and shifted the other half to lower desirable positions with worse pay. Then a month later had a second wave of layoffs where they got rid of all those they'd shifted around. We accepted their contract not long after that. I 100% believe that they hired all these people with the express purpose of laying them off in order to try to scare the union into voting yes on a shitty contract. There's no way they hired a dozen people every month for half a year and just didn't realize they had too many people. Not that many for that long. They hired a bunch of people they knew they didn't actually need, so they had that buffer to let people go without actually affecting productivity. There have actually been proven cases like this. Sometimes companies do genuinely make mistakes, or unions can make mistakes, but there has been several cases, especially since the 1990s, where companies with unions as one of their employee sources would hire a ton of people near contract negotiation times at low pay and let them go in quick succession. They would do this constantly during contract negotiations. Sometimes a union would hold fast and realize this, such as the case of a couple trucking unions. Other times some would fold, such as the case of Smith's retail union. Today's Smiths pays slightly higher than most grocery stores, but they also treat their workers like cattle and have very poor work safety or benefits. This also applies to public unions too. As long as workers are organized, there will always be the powerful trying to fight against them and hold on to their power. At least once, a human clone has been made and been allowed to develop all the way to a living, breathing person.
I struggle to doubt that China, Russia, or the US hasn't already tried to genetically engineer super smart or enhanced people. Hopefully they were smart enough to make them mules if so.
They already did. The documentary Rocky IV featured Ivan Drago, the first genetically engineered human.
That if politicians were punished like the average man, that half our politicians would be jailed.
Half? What a utopia that would be if only half the politicians were corrupt. Memes aside, on the same logic, I truly believe if politicians were held to the same standard of fitness and aptitude for the job as a 16-year-old part-time worker at McDonald's and would be fired for failing to meet this standard, every elected official, except maybe presidents or prime ministers, for the last 80-plus years would have been fired 6 months into the job. And prime ministers and presidents are only excluded from this list because I believe they make up the hours they are paid for, so maybe some of them can squeeze through. But many of them would still be fired for incompetency.
Sandwiches taste better when cut diagonally.
Sandwiches taste better when other people make them.
This is actually provable. There's a phenomenon in humans where things you got with no effort or cost taste better. Like, there is literal science behind it. Pretty sure I watched a Vsauce video on it. So basically, what you said is absolutely true.
Yeah, as I recall, it's because it's a bit of a surprise to your senses, but if you made it yourself, you already handled, smelled, or tasted bits of it as you put it together, so there is an extra level of enjoyment of someone else made it for you.
That I am the handsomest man in the world. Right now, I only have hearsay evidence from my mom and grandma, but I'm sure I'll get the hard, indisputable evidence soon.
Most actual government cover-ups are just the government covering up their own incompetence. There's no deep state, they just suck at their jobs.
I did my crazy conspiracy stage around like age 16. A huge part that got me away from it was a better understanding of business and seeing that virtually every theory, incident, or weird saga of events is always greed. Hypothetical example, no, Company X didn't poison the water supply of that community to kill them purposefully. It was just infinitely cheaper to dump it.
TikTok and all the copycats, Reels, YouTube Shorts, etc., regardless of content, are having a deleterious effect on the attention spans of daily users, which are mostly young people.
Let's be honest, all social media, including Reddit, is contributing to this. Rapid and easy dopamine is an issue. We weren't meant to feel bored when we go more than 5 minutes without a dopamine hit.
I've heard and agree with the idea that we are actually meant to be bored and that being bored generally provokes you to do something to not be bored, which can sometimes have a very productive effect. Following this logic, where many people's boredom would turn productive, it is now displaced with social media.
That 90% of the conspiracy theories, anti-vax, and crazy political posts you see online, particularly ones calling for violence, are being circulated by foreign actors to purposefully sow discord and destabilize Western democracies.
Maybe not 90%, but this has been pretty heavily reported over the past few years. Unfortunately, the campaigns have been pretty successful, and much of it has built domestic momentum.
Big box stores have been systematically making the shopping experience worse to discourage in-store shopping and push people to their online stores. They're trying to get out of the brick-and-mortar business because of the high overhead cost, but they know that simply shutting stores down will be hugely unpopular. By understaffing so that shelves don't get stocked and locking product behind glass, they can blame employees and theft for store closures without losing too many customers to other online retailers.
They're also starting to feel the pinch of losing impulse purchases, though. Once they're entirely online, they're at the mercy of competitors with cheaper pricing or better marketing at the click of a few keys. The brick-and-mortar stores can turn the stink ship back around if they start pushing shopping as a convenient alternative to shitty counterfeit products with no support. I'm a dummy optimist, though.
That my father actually died of COVID and not heart failure. Like, he got really sick. He had an infection that the hospital didn't know what it was or how to treat it. He ended up on a ventilator and life support. He passed, and then 3 weeks later, they shut the state down due to COVID. Not to mention, the hospital held onto his body a few extra days, and we never got a reason why. It's all circumstantial, but it makes sense. Testing wasn't available at the time. The symptoms matched, and it all happened at the perfect time. However, we had him cremated, so we'll never know. Not that it would ease the grief, but it's a thought that lingers in my mind. Edit. I did not expect this to blow up after going to bed. I'm at work and can't reply to everyone's comment. But here's a quick sum up. I thank everyone for their well wishes. It means a lot to me. Because of shutdown, my family didn't have a funeral for my dad. My mom, brothers, and I scattered my dad into the Withlacoochee River and had breakfast. I find talking about to be helpful and often share stories about him when I can. I know the hospital ran all the tests and did the x-ray, but since my dad had congestive heart failure and diabetes, it just made things worse. Please do take care of yourself and get vaccinated if you can.